Well, thank you so much, CJ, for being willing to do this. As you know, I'm on a mission to increase awareness and decrease stigma so that, others that kind of are out there maybe suffering do not have to suffer in silence anymore. They don't have to feel so alone. So I was just wondering if you would introduce yourself for us and then let us know, like, what was life like before you began your recovery journey?
All right. Well, I really appreciate you doing this. This is awesome. I know that when I first started my recovery, it would have been great to hear other stories. And I did listen to a lot of podcasts. And I always enjoyed listening to other people's recovery stories. So I really appreciate you doing this. My name is CJ Nye, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. If you can't hear the Southern accent. Gosh, so I've been at this for a while, but in recovery, I haven't been doing it that long. I kind of I kind of grew up in there's addiction around me, but it was all fairly normal. Like it just seemed like normal life to me. And I was determined for it to never get me. And so I thought it was something that I could outrun. And that's exactly the way that I've lived my life. Now, looking back at it, now that I've been doing recovery now for over 20 months, I can see it like ribboned all through my life and all the different things that I would get addicted to, whether it be exercise or food or alcohol. It's just all there, like in big bright letters, and I just couldn't see it because I was too far into it to notice that it was a problem. Um, I am 56 years old. I have a regular life. I have 4 kids, 4 amazing children. 3 are in college, one's in high school. I'm married to probably the best man I know. Sorry, I get choked up talking about my family. We've been married for 24 years. And I grew up fairly normal. I had very supportive parents. They were always trying to help me be the best that I could be. Unfortunately, they didn't realize how much trauma was going on behind the scenes that they just didn't know about, and I just wasn't able to tell them, to voice it to them. So that just kind of was just kind of I just grew up kind of regular. I have a learning disability that was I didn't find out about until my daughter was in grade school, and I started relating to some of the problems that she was having and realized, oh my gosh, I actually can learn I just learned differently then. So I went to a lot of different schools. We moved a lot, so I went to like 13 different schools. So I just kept getting passed along, because I'd just show up at school and they would just pass me along. And they didn't know where I was doing. So really kind of funny, since I started my recovery and into my recovery journey, that has been one of the biggest gifts is I love information and I love to learn and I love to read the books. And if somebody suggests a book, um, which is that I'll go if I'm interested in the subject, I'll go and read it, and I listen to the podcast. And I don't necessarily always understand the really scientific-y stuff, but I get a general overview of it, and it makes I'm like, okay, I got it. Yeah. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
What was kind of your aha moment that, like, hey, something's not right? Because I know you have a story with alcohol as well as food. Can you kind of talk us through, like, what happened there? Like, what was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back?
Yes, so it started probably about 5 years ago, really, even though I've only been in recovery for about 20 months. My mother died unexpectedly, which just kind of threw the whole family into chaos. And so from there, that is when my alcohol, I was kind of an average drinker. Was more of a social drinker. And I was also an athlete. So I didn't really drink that much. But when my mother passed away and I was having to help along some family members they were having issues with my mother dying so unexpectedly, it became just like too much. Like I could not deal with life on life's terms at all. And I turned to alcohol and chocolate, and they were like my go to. I would do everything for as many people as I could all day long. And then by the time 4 or 5 o'clock rolled around, I was in the chocolate and the wine. I was also injured at the time from over exercising. I had a torn hamstring, and so I just couldn't I couldn't work out. So the things that I had used as my tools weren't there anymore. And I turned to really unhealthy tools. So I went on with like that for a couple of years, and I started researching as the latest and greatest diet, right? Because I was gaining a good bit of weight. And I came across a book. I came across a book called through my research called Better Than Before by Gretchen Rubin. And somebody was talking about that book, and I think it was on a podcast that I found out about the book. Well, I got it and I read it, and I found out about abstainers versus moderators. And my husband is a perfect example of a moderator, and I'm a perfect example of an abstainer. And so that was kind of like my aha moment, like, okay, like I can abstain. So then I started working and I got into the 12-step model for a 12-step program for the alcohol, because I kept trying to abstain, but I couldn't do it. Every day I would come home, I was like, okay, today I'm not going to drink, or today I'm not going to eat the chocolate, or whatever it was for that day. And I did every day. I would end in utter failure. And I was like, and so I started thinking about it. I was like, I just need help. Like every other area of my life, I've been able to push through, and I was like, this isn't one of those things. And I was like, I was just naive or lucky enough or blessed enough that I didn't know that there's this whole stigma to the 12-step program. I didn't know that it was cult like. I was so blessed that I didn't know that, because that's where I really found my tribe. And I found the most amazing people to help me, and to start dealing with life on life's term. So that really got me. So I started working a 12-step program on the alcohol, and I knew that the food was a problem, but I couldn't tackle everything all at one time. So I remember telling my sponsor at one time, though, going, I'm really having a problem with this sugar. And she's like, CJ, just don't drink, just eat the damn cookie. And I was like, but what she didn't understand is it wasn't going to be a cookie. It was going to be a sleeve of cookies, or a container of cookies, or something. Whatever the packaging is, that was the serving. And so it was about 10 months into my, it started a little bit before that, about 6 months after I'd gotten sober from alcohol, for about 6 months, that I started hearing about different podcasts. And that's when I stumbled upon the Food Junkies podcast. Either somebody told me about it, or I found out about it, or something like that. And I just started absorbing everything that y'all were saying. And if somebody wrote a book, I would go listen to it, or because I love to walk. And by then I was pretty much recovered from my different injuries. So I would listen to stuff. And then I tried getting abstinent on my own, which was not working. Again, the problem I was having, I couldn't do it on my own. It was just too big of a problem. So the next thing that I tried was for abstinence was I found out about 12-step food programs. And there were so many of them. And I had heard, kind of remember my mother doing OA, but I don't really remember a lot about it. That is part of my learning disabilities. It's both a blessing and a curse. I have a terrible memory. So from there, I found out about a program called FAA, Food Addicts Anonymous. And their program is you're abstinent from sugar, flour, and wheat. Well, I had no idea about the flour and the wheat. I knew about the sugar, but I didn't know about that. And so I decided that I was going to do the program. And by then, because we'd already been through COVID, they were online, and I was already doing my AA meetings. So I was like, okay, I can do this online. So that's exactly what I did. So I made the abstinent date very, very important. I picked it because I knew if it was important to me, if it had something important to it, that I was more likely to keep it. So my abstinent date is March 7th, 2021. And my 12-step for my alcohol is May 7th. So they're both M and both 7. So, and both those months are very important to me. So I started on that journey. Right away, I got really sick. I don't know, like my body was like, I don't know what you're doing, but so I got really sick for like a month. I had everything and a sinus infection and all this kind of stuff. So it was actually a blessing because I was so exhausted, from the different things the different things that I was going through and I was having to go to the doctors that I had nothing but time to recover. So I would do 2 meetings a day in my FAA, and I would go to an AA meeting once a day. So I stayed in recovery until I could get abstinent, and it worked like a charm for me.
That is amazing. Oh gosh. So like you said, it's kind of like a blessing. Like you were down and out for the count. So you kind of like leaned in or dug in and said, I can do this. I can sit in my bed or my chair, not feeling well, and I can still attend a meeting or three a day and get that momentum going. So I'm wondering, like, do you remember, can you kind of talk about like how hard it is in the beginning and how you found the momentum or motivation or willpower, whatever it was, to keep going through the difficult stuff?
So the big takeaway here for that question is community. And for me, I'm if you know anything about the Enneagrams and stuff like that, I'm the helper. Like that's just who I am. I love to help people. It fills up my cup. I So for me, helping other people get abstinent, or as y'all like to say, harm reduction, whatever that looks like in their world, to help the next person. I feel a sense of obligation to do that. I try not to do it in my own family because if Jesus can't be a prophet in his own land, neither can I. So I try to just, answer the questions that the people have. I'm not really good at it yet. I'm getting better. But so for me, it's just staying in the community and staying involved. And when I first started this, I tell you, there were many days where I just didn't think I was going to make it through because I was like the cravings were so strong, and my tolerance for dealing with distress or anything that was going wrong. And when you have 4 children, and at that time I was running my own business as well. And I run my own business from home. So there's like no escaping it. Like you're at home, you're working, and you're with the kids. I don't get to go to an office. So if there's any issue, and there always will be when you have that many children and we have dogs. So there's all those things. There's always an opportunity, like things are not going the way they're going to be planned. They're just not. And what I didn't realize at the time was I had no tolerance for my emotional state dealing with these little issues, these little distressful issues. I didn't have the tools. My tools were basically to eat or drink over them. And they used to always be eat until the drinking became a problem. And I was like, okay, well, that's not going to work because I'm not going to do either one of those. So I had little mantras that I would say. I actually heard this on an OA tape where it says, don't eat no matter what, don't eat. Now, I'm not talking about don't eat the healthy food. I mean, don't eat the crap. And then the other thing is I have my addictive brain. I named her, I heard this all long ago. I named her Ursula. And yes, she's after the Little Mermaid, because like she's big and mean. And so I would talk to her in the beginning and I would just tell her to shut up, and leave me alone. And when things would start spinning up, like I needed to eat something or I felt like I needed to eat something. So in the beginning, it was very tough, but I was also sick. So it was a blessing.
But it also sounds like over time, so using the community, but then like also like little bits of information that you had gathered, you kind of started trying some of these tactics, like naming that voice Ursula so you could like talk back to her, or like leaning on different people, or even just like going to a meeting or something along those lines. You were doing work. It sounds like you somehow just found it in you to keep trying things. I'm not really sure, but it sounds like, whatever it was, it worked. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It worked. It continues to work for you. Now, I also know that you participated in some of the sweet sobriety stuff. specifically the foundations, that we're calling it now the foundations. I think you got to experience it when we were auditing treatment. And so I was wondering, did you find any of that helpful? Like, was there anything that was kind of like that sticks out that was maybe like your favorite, or something that you think of maybe as being the most helpful at the time, at that point in your journey?
Okay, well, let me speak to your audience first who's listening to this. Okay, listen to me. Now, she didn't pay me and I'm not getting paid for this, but you should do it. Okay, just do it, because I had the spirituality down with my 12-step program. I was making inroads there, and that was really that really filled up my cup spiritually. And I highly recommend 12-step programs, especially if you can find a really good one and a very supportive one where you can get people who are spiritually further along than you are. But that was so helpful to me. I needed both of the programs. I needed sweet sobriety. And so when I had the opportunity to be in the audit program, I was like, I absolutely wanted to do it. I'm kind of one of those people that if I can afford to do it and it'll make me a better person, then I absolutely will do it. And my husband's very supportive like that with me as well. I just tell him what I want to do and why I think that would work for me. And he's extremely supportive like that. So I did get the opportunity to take all of the sweet sobriety modules. And I've also gotten the chance to, every class that y'all have done, I'm in sweet sobriety, because I just find it so valuable. And because of my learning disability, I have to hear things over and over again. And I can't listen to a lecture and take notes at the same time. My brain doesn't work like that. So for me, like listening to things happen repeatedly, then I can learn more about them. So I might not get it the first time. I sort of say it's like planting the seed, and then I can get it on maybe the second or third time. And so doing the sweet sobriety and having the modules and having the where I got to work out the things, the modules that came with it and the paperwork and stuff like that, that was extremely helpful to me. My favorite one, which I get to do a lot of coaching calls and stuff like that. And I do a lot of peer support calls because I really love them. With my coaching calls, I reference this one all the time. The one that really spoke to me, and I was just like, I couldn't even believe it. Like, I really kind of consider myself a pretty strong person, but the fact that I was so distress intolerant was just like mind blowing. I couldn't have seen that one coming. I would not have told anybody that I was distress intolerant, but I have problems with transitions. Even to this day, and even though I even know more now, and I'm like, I can look back at things and go, oh yeah, well, now I see it there, but I didn't necessarily see it before. So that one's been my favorite. I mean, I loved every one of them, but that one's probably the one I used the most.
Was there any that was like more challenging, that maybe rubbed you in a wrong way or didn't really land for you?
Well, I will tell you, I've had the opportunity to do this one certain module 3 times now, 3 times, and 3 times I have not done it. And 3 times I have talked to, or at least a couple of times, I've talked to my accountability buddy, and I've tried to, we're almost laughing at it at this point. It's the slip inventory, or I don't know exactly which module it's in. And in my mind, I'm like, if I do this, then I have an out. Like, okay, you have a plan, and I will go. And in my mind, I think that I'll mess up so that I can see if it'll work. Now, I will tell you this. I've had incidents where food I didn't realize there was sugar or flour or something in it. And it's happened to me more than a couple of times. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 months, and I know I can think of off the top of my head that I know for sure that this has happened 3 times. So with that being said, every time that has happened, I have just returned back to what I was doing before. So I guess in a way I have done it mentally, but as for writing it down on the paper, I haven't done it. And I actually I have a therapist that I work with, and I told her about my resistance to doing this module, and she actually gave it to me as the new year I was supposed to do it. Still haven't done it.
Hey, we all kind of have like that like line in the sand where there's some resistance to it for one reason or another. And it sounds like it's feeling maybe a bit unsafe for you because you kind of foresee this as maybe being like a permission giving kind of assignment where you know your brain well enough, or you think you do, right? That if you were to go ahead and have a plan, if there were to be a slip, that somehow Ursula would take over and be like, well, let's test that out, kind of
Yeah,
thing. So
exactly.
yeah, when you're ready, you're ready. But I mean, I think it's really important when we're on these like healing journeys or recovery journeys that like we just name our truth. Like that's just your truth. It's just where you're at. I mean, if you continue to return back to like that distress and tolerance thing and like really like address that, I mean, I can't even imagine, because you know yourself way better than I would could ever know you, but I would imagine that CJ today sitting here can recognize that she is very different than CJ 10 months ago.
Oh, yeah, I can see it. And I think this is true of a lot of addicts. And for me, when I landed in recovery, the two things that I know are my truth was I'm not good enough. That's what I thought about. It's not good. There's always room for improvement. You can always be better. And I'm a people pleaser by nature. So those two things together were just keeping me stuck. Like and I was living in the past. I couldn't live in the now. So it was like I kept having to go back and forth, and I was like, and I would clear some hurdle that I would, come, and then I would be like, no, 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 you could do it better, or it's like taking notes, like they could be better notes or something like that. And now I try to be like, no, it's good enough. It's good enough just the way that it is, and we're working with that. And I will purposely do things like just to say that it's good enough. And so I think I've grown a lot, and I don't cry nearly as much as I used to. I used to cry all the time. And so I get choked up more, but I get choked up, but I don't cry as much as I used to. And I think that obviously being abstinent, that has made and that's the other thing that I knew about the food is I knew that it was having mental impact on me. And the one thing, and I've said this in coaching meetings and stuff like that, is I couldn't figure it out. Like it didn't make any sense to me. My health has always been extremely important to me. I've always been very interested in health and wellness. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't stay at a healthy weight. It just didn't make sense to me. But now that I know that it was food addiction, like and I've said this before, I feel like I won the lottery when I found out about food addiction. And to the person who's sitting there going, are you insane, woman? Just stay with me, because I now had a reason for my behaviors. I had a reason why I couldn't do certain things on my own, but I could get help. And if you can get help, then you can get hope. And I was never hopeless much. There was a time right before I ended up going into my 12-step program that I did feel kind of hopeless. And that's when I knew. I was like, this is a problem, because my mother was a very hopeful person, and she always she believed in everybody, that everybody could find recovery or find what their truth was. And she gave me that. And so for me, I was like, I need more help than I can give myself. And that's when I knew to go look for it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I love what you said when, if you can get help, there's hope. And like, that's what my hope is for this, these stories, this project is just spreading this message of hope that we're not alone, that there are these options out there for you. I love in particular how you said, you had this spirituality thing. And I think you had that maybe a bit even before you got into the 12-step rooms, but then it was, maybe a little bit, bolstered, leveled up, something along those lines, right? Like you really had that piece. And then there was this treatment piece where like, it sounds like they really like matched well for you, where you were getting what you needed here, and then you got something more that you needed here. And so I'm kind of wondering, because you've read a lot of books and you've listened to a lot of podcasts and you've done a lot of things at this point. Like, what do you think that this, like that treatment, or even specifically the treatment that we have provided along the line, Sweet Sobriety, because you've done like all these different things, you know, is, do we offer anything different than what's out there? Is there anything we could be doing better? You know, like, talk to me a bit about that. Or is it okay the way that it is? Is it the
Well,
same as other stuff that's out there?
well, in the food addiction world, I haven't done any other treatments. So but with my alcohol issue, I did try a couple of other things, and they did work. But the problem is I was always trying to return to use. Like I was gonna moderate it, but once I found out that I was not a moderator, then and it's actually easier for me to abstain than it is for me to try to moderate it. That was like the big piece. The other thing that I forgot to mention this. The other thing is because I was so interested in my health, like it was very important to me. My mother died at 74. My grandmother died at 72. And I wanted to know why, and that seems very young to me. I know there are plenty of people who die younger than that, and I wanted to know why it was that something that was so important to me that eluded me so much. And I didn't think that I had to work out 4 or 5 hours a day to stay at a healthy weight. Like that, I'm like, nobody, that didn't make sense to me either, you know. So the one of the pieces that I did was I knew about a company that did a continuous glucose monitor. You did not have to be diabetic to use it. And I was fortunate enough to have insurance that paid for most of it. And I got a continuous glucose monitor and I wore it. And so when I would eat these, where I would have these episodes, and I wasn't really, I don't want to say I'm a binge eater, but I would have episodes where I would eat garbage food, and it would be like my stomach would be upset because it didn't agree with me. And so I could watch what it was doing to my blood sugar. And the when I and when my emotional state was fairly bad, or I was going through something emotional, and if you've ever had kids go off to college, it can be very emotional at that time. And I have three that are in college and school right now. And so sometimes just letting them, you know, spread their wings and stuff like that, I would have all these things that I was going through, and I would eat more. By then I wasn't drinking. But I was turning to the food, and I would see what it was doing to my health. And I'm also an older mother. I'm 56 and I have a 14-year-old. And I'm like, okay, if you aren't going to take care of yourself, she's never even going to have the opportunity for her mother for her to be old enough. I'm going to die at 74. She'll be 34. And that's not fair. Now I know I could go get hit by a bus, but I would be doing everything. And I felt a sense of obligation to my youngest child and to my children in general to be around for them. And when I saw how bad I was destroying my health by eating this garbage food, I was like, you know, I can't do that. I have a higher power who I call God. My mother was very important to my mother, and I spent a lot of time learning about and teaching. I do go to church every week. I go to a non-denominational church. I'm active in the church. I do lead a lot of groups at church. I enjoy it. I love it. It makes me fills up my cup. And being around for my children and being there for my 14-year-old and my kids, it also fills up my cup. So I have a really strong obligation to take care of my health. I didn't want to just become abstinent from sugar, flour, and wheat because it would make my life easier. It had to be like the whole picture. It had to be spiritual, it had to be mental, it had to be physical, emotional. Everything together had to work so that I more of the person I'm supposed to be, who God intended me to be. And that's how my thought process worked.
Amazing, because that's how this works, right? Is it's biopsychosocial, spiritual. Like there's a holistic approach that needs to happen when it comes to something like this, because it does impact relationships. It does impact mental health, emotional health, cognitive health, right? It does impact your relationship to higher power, to, yourself, all of those things. And so just to hear that, like, that's the way that you think and that's the way you've really approached it is amazing. Like that matches up, right? And it's working for you. And so I'm wondering, like, what is life like in recovery now? Like, how have relationships changed? What is your mental health like today versus then, cognitively, emotionally? Can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like today? Because I think it's hard to know, right? We see your bright, shining, smiley face, and this is how we see you often, right? Like I can attest, guys. Like I see CJ pretty often, and she's never not with a smile on her face, unless it's cold outside and she's walking in the wind or something. There might be a grimace, but it's hard to imagine what you were like 10 months ago or even 20 months ago before you started. So I'm just wondering, can you kind of talk us through, like, what is it like now?
Well, actually, I was just talking with my with one of my friends this morning, and I was telling her that the thing about recovery is it's not linear. It's not just woo, you just take off and you just go straight up. That's not the way it works. And but what? Okay, first of all, I have an amazing life, like gratitude. Like I am just so grateful. Like I am so grateful for the people that God has placed in my life, like Molly and Clarissa and Jennifer and Bethany and in my 12-step groups. Um, I, for me, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a wife and a mother, and I wanted a big family, and I got everything that I wanted. Like that was it. And so for recovery for me now, but it ebbs and flows. In that I'm working on two really difficult things right now in my recovery program. One was giving up my scale, which I don't know how many days I'm into this, but it's short of 2 weeks. And that has been such a huge obstacle. And it's getting better, but at the same time, it is very challenging. It's extremely challenging. And then the other thing that I'm working on, like that just isn't good enough. Got to do more than that. Is I am very hungry in the mornings, but I ignore my hunger and just drink coffee. And I just don't feel that that's the right thing to do um, at this point in my recovery. So I've eaten breakfast twice, and not that I never ate breakfast in the 10 months I've been doing this, because I have, but normally 90% of the time I wouldn't eat breakfast, and it was a conscious choice to ignore my hunger. And I just don't feel that that's the right thing to do. But however, saying that, eating breakfast is very difficult. And so I'm having to overcome that. Uh, and so those are the things that I get to experiment things, and then I'll ride along pretty comfortably and helping other people in their recovery, which I enjoy doing. Um, but I almost for like the day-to-day kind of stuff, is that what we're talking about? Is that okay? So the day-to-day thing, first of all, in the morning I wake up, and before I even get out of the bed, I start with just connecting with God, and I ask him to let me live in his will for today. And I don't, believe me, don't do this anywhere close to perfect. And sometimes I've even forgotten 5 minutes after I get out of the bed. But to live in his will, and I say my serenity prayer every morning. And if Ursula gets going, because sometimes she's been known to show up at about the same time that I'm trying to connect with God, I try to get her out of the way quickly. And then from there, I do have some quiet time. I get to spend time with my youngest daughter. And usually I head out 3 to 5 days a week. I head out to a 12-step meeting very early in the morning. And that just kind of sets the tone for the day. I work out 3 to 5 days a week, probably closer to 5. I try to take at least 2 days, but some days I just walk. But I do work out with a trainer because it really helps me feel good about myself. So that exercise is a big piece to me. I'm usually jump in on a coaching call or a peer support call every day. So that usually is usually 2 meetings a day. And sometimes I've been known to go to three, because I just enjoy them so much. And I usually get something out of them. But then, like, I recover every day. Like, that's the most important thing. Recovery comes first, and everything else lines up behind that. And then I do my the day's kind of normal with the kids and work or whatever the case may be. But in the evening, my evening practice has really worked for me because I've never been really good at sleeping. It's been something I've struggled with most of my adult for as long as I can remember. And I've been on different medications for it. And currently I'm taking no medications, and I really enjoy that in my life. So that's kind of been, so getting my sleep was really important to me. So, and I learned, and I started reading novels. Like, this is real new. Like, I never was a novel reader. And so in the evenings, I say my prayers before I even get into bed. I write in a journal every night, 95% of the time. And then I read for pleasure. I read a book. It takes me forever to finish a novel because I only read like typically one chapter. And then I meditate. And usually during my meditation, I usually will drift off to sleep. It's a guided meditation. If I feel like during the day, if things are getting a little squirrely or something's along those lines, I reach out. I I talk to so many people every day. I don't have a number count of how many people I talk to every day that are in recovery. Like, either I reach out through texting or telephone call, but every day involves somebody in recovery or helping someone who maybe is at the beginning of their recovery. So those are the kind of things that I do day to day. If you're if familiar with the 12-step model, I get to be happy, joyous, and free, and I really subscribe to that. I do love to be happy. Like, I really enjoy, and I love showing up for people who just don't have the strength. They're dealing with something very heavy, and not that I don't deal with stuff heavy, and I show up that way too. But when they're dealing with something heavy, I want them to be able to borrow the strength of the group. And so when I show up and I can show them that there is light at the end of the tunnel and it's not a train, that it can be done. Like, and it can be, you can live this way, because I hear this out in the real world, that how am I going to live without sugar? And I'm like, you'd be amazed. There are a lot of people who can't eat sugar who aren't in recovery. Like, and I guess I had a good model for that. My daughter has a lot of food allergies. And so I've been doing that for years. Sugar isn't one of them. Darn, I wish it was. But so I've helped her with her different food things all along the way. So she was a good model for me when I started doing this.
That's so awesome. And I just love hearing like the things that you do throughout the day. And I also appreciate that you said, you don't, not necessarily are you like struggling so much that you need to go to 3 meetings a day, but simply that it fits into your schedule. You really enjoy it. You get something out of it. And you always give back too. I mean, I don't want people to think that like people come to group and they're just like cameras off and nobody's sharing, right? Like, I'm just there to suck it all up. Like, you're contributing and you're giving feedback to others, and you're also asking for support from the group, and I think that there's something to that like you're very intentional, you're very interactive. You're not just like trying to heal by osmosis, like you're doing work, and I really love that you said there's light at the end of the tunnel and it's not a train. That just made my day. So BJ, before I let you go, we kind of have a signature question for this series too, just like we do on the podcast. So I'm wondering, what is something that you needed to hear, back at the beginning of your journey?
Gosh, what is something that I needed to hear? So just so y'all know, she gave me a list of questions. I didn't look at them. So it probably goes along the same line that, that there is recovery, that it's not linear. It is that it's kind of peaks and valleys, and that there are a lot of people out here. to get help, and don't be scared to ask for help, because you don't have to do it by yourself. And that is probably one of the things that I really struggled with, is because I really thought of myself. I've had things in the past in my 20s, where I had some really challenging things, and I ended up just like saying, okay, I never want to come back to where I was. So I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps, and I'm just going to continue on. The problem with that is you basically just sweep it under the rug. And so you're really not dealing, for me, I wasn't really dealing with the problem. I just chose to ignore them. And you can get recovery. I can get recovery by dealing with the problems and showing up. Just show up. You don't have to talk necessarily. You can just show up until you can find your voice. And when you find your voice, then make sure that you get to be heard, because you have something that somebody else is looking for. I always was kind of stuck in the fact that I am very chatty, I'm very outgoing, and I would hear people say to me, unfortunately, I concentrated on the people that would tell me that I was too much, instead of concentrating on the people who appreciated that about me. I gave more voice to people who should matter less than voice to the people who should matter most. And I don't have to live that way anymore. I'm not for everybody, and it's okay. But the people who can get something when I say something, when I share something, when I share my experience, strength, and hope, if they can get something out of it and help them on their next leg, because I only get today. And so I need to live in the now, and my recovery's in the now. So whatever I'm doing right now to recover is what I get to know about, because even the past is just a memory of the past, and the future is just a thought about the future. So I have to stay here and do the recovery work today. So for me, it would be about, if I could go back, I would say just stay in the now and stop living in the past, because it's not helpful.
Oh, that's so true and so beautiful. And I just appreciate you, CJ, giving me all this time today and being willing to be on this series, and just for everything that you do for the community that we're a part of. And so if there's ever anything that I can do to support you, please, please, please just let me know, because you know what I mean? It's a two-way street. It's a two-way relationship. And I'm honored to be with you on this journey. So thank you so much.
Well, the feeling is definitely mutual. I will never, I know there's no debt to repay, but if there were, I would never be able to repay it, because I'm just so grateful that God has put people like you in my path. Like, I just don't know what I would do. I just feel so honored and blessed by you and Clarissa and Bethany and and Dr. Tarman and Jennifer. I feel so honored, and it is such an incredible opportunity that I won't squander it. So thank you for letting me be here. I loved every minute of it, and I feel like I could talk to you all day and twice on Sunday.
Same. Same. All right. Well, we'll let these good folks go then. Thanks, guys.
If you like what you heard today, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.